Oh
I don't care what Houston did yesterday. They're going to go get their Letterman jackets again. The Indianapolis Colts are 2-6 against the Titans since Pat McAfee came up here and did his wrestling announcement. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they haven't had back-to-back winning seasons since I was a senior in high school.
What's up, Titans fans, and welcome to another episode of Titans Global Podcast. I'm your host, Maximus Titan Fan, and with me, as always, is my buddy Link. What's up, dude?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Good to be here. I'm glad to see you all again. Hope everybody's had time to kind of calm down and, get over their initial reactions and kind of do some research and see where we're at. So, but as always, we want to involve you guys, so make sure you're commenting. Make sure, as always, you like, subscribe. But I say it every time, this show is for y'all. So get on here, chat with us, let us know what you think kind of as we go through these picks, and we'll get through it together.
Absolutely. And tonight, if you didn't notice, we have a special guest with us returning to the show for a third or fourth. I don't know. I've lost count now, but it doesn't matter. Jake Robertson, what's up, man?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know who that is, you should really be ashamed of yourselves. But go follow him on Twitter, Jake Robinson at Glory Day Sports. Great content over there. I was just talking pre-show with these guys about how hard this draft process is to get through. It's a struggle. There's so many prospects out there you're looking at pre-draft. Just hats off to all these guys that do this draft analysis all the time. But tonight, that's what we're going to talk about. Draft. I mean, it's all about the draft. Who we got? What's up, Hugo from Brazil? What's up, man? But that's what we got. Draft. So, let's get down to it. First round draft pick. J.C. Latham. Initial gut reaction, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I was like, okay, or really? I knew the Titans liked him. There was some chatter amongst the people that the Titans really did like him. So I knew that they had their eye on him. But I had no idea they were going to go after him in the first round. He's a right tackle, But then they started talking about moving him to left tackle. Did a little bit of research, found out this isn't the first time Bill Callahan's done that. So what do you guys think? What's up, Link? What do you think about it?
I'm with you. My initial reaction, I didn't like the pick. If you're watching the live show, it kind of took me back a little bit. But we're sitting there and we see Alt go. And then, you see Neighbors go and you're like, man, I don't know if there's anybody right now at number 7 that the Titans, if they could trade back and maybe grab a couple picks. Because obviously there were still some quarterbacks on the board. We kind of saw a historical night with quarterbacks and offensive players. So I thought, if you can trade back, if you can gain a pick, I still think you're going to have Fashanu there. I still think you're going to have some guys there that I even think, even still, I think Latham might have been there a little later. But for me, after I got over kind of that initial reaction and started kind of looking into it, you've got Callahan there, historical offensive line coach. If anybody can take a right tackle, especially a guy with a ceiling as high as Latham and move him to left, I think it's him. So, you needed an offensive tackle. You got an offensive tackle. I don't hate the move. For me, I think that initial reaction was just like, you've got Rome still sitting there. You could pick up a couple draft picks. And I don't know. My initial reaction, I didn't like it, but I think there is some upside to him. Like I said, I think the ceiling's high. I think he can come in and make an impact. I mean, obviously, I think he's going to be a day one starter at left tackle. I think they're going to get him to that point. He's got the physicality. Nick Saban, he talked about how it's a requirement that his offensive linemen play at 360. Looks like he's dropped some weight, so that's going to make him a little bit more mobile on the offensive line. So, yeah, I think there's some upside to it. Alt kind of felt like a safe bet to me, but once he went, it's a little more risky with Latham, but I think the upside's definitely there.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, anything to add to that, brother?
Yeah, I think initial reaction was the initial 6 picks fell exactly how I had them in my final mock draft, other than I had the Jets trading up to 5 to draft Joe Alt. Personally, going through this draft process, I actually liked Olu Fashanu as my OT1. So there was the disappointment in that, just because number 3 on my big board would have been over the moon. Very upset that Malik Neighbors went 1 pick before us to the Giants, and I think Malik Neighbors is just as upset as we are as Titans fans, looking at him landing there with the Giants, and for all good reason. Shout out to Jonathan, my co-host in the chat. Thanks for joining us tonight. But when we look at Latham, Rand Carthon is showing to have he's a size queen. He likes the big hands. You got to have mitts. And this dude has 10-inch plus hands. He's been very productive there at Alabama. And what I see from the outside perspective of fans is they saw that final game. And he didn't have his best showing in that Rose Bowl game. But if you look at his career, he's been very productive. And there's been the talk of, well, he's a right tackle and not a left tackle. And that's ultimately the biggest hole. But when he arrived there at Alabama, Evan Neal was actually the left tackle there. So he ultimately did switch after being the, I believe, number 1 left tackle coming out of high school as a 5-star at the IMG Academy, where he actually blocked J.J. McCarthy's blindside there for a couple of years. And then they bring in the number 1 left tackle in high school after Evan Neal leaves as a true freshman, 6'7", 315 plus pounds. And the Alabama offense wanted to keep that continuity with him on the right side and not want to switch him over and take a freshman out of what he's comfortable doing. So ultimately, while the pick may have not been the guy I wanted, it makes a lot of sense. And this is Bill Callahan's dude. This is his favorite prospect in the draft that we've heard. And that can just be talk over talk. But ultimately, this is the left tackle. This is blocking Will Levis's blind side for hopefully the next 8 to 10 years. So I think the athleticism, the size, the strength is all there. And then if we're comparing him to maybe like a Joe Alt out there, Joe Alt is very good at everything, but he's not a master of anything.
Right.
Latham has those calling cards. That size and that strength is second to none in this draft class. So I was maybe a little hostile after the initial pick, but it makes sense. It makes sense, and this is a good pick in my opinion.
So, question, since we're kind of on that, and we kind of done the comparison of Alt and Latham, if let's say Alt's there at 7, do you think the Titans change their pick and go with Alt and go with kind of the safer pick, somebody who kind of has the maybe a wider tool shed, or do you think that Latham really was their guy?
I think they will tell you Latham was their guy. Right. I think it would have been ultimately Joe Alt. They brought him in for the visit. I think that would have been the easiest pick. And when you're looking at those kind of players and prospects on the board, this could ultimately cost Rand his job if he was to go a Latham over potentially Alt a couple years from now, and it doesn't work out. And Joe Alt is a perennial Pro Bowler, All-Pro, etc. Right. So I think it would have been Joe Alt, but ultimately I don't think he was ever going to fall to 7. I think somebody would have came up. I think the Giants maybe even take him at 6 if he was there and switch him over to right tackle. I think ultimately it was just kind of a long shot, but I think we still got maybe the second best. They're number 2 tackle on the board, and at 7, I mean that's still kind of a steal. I don't mind that at all.
So here's my thing, man. First of all, you'll see a whole trend with this draft. Last draft, it was kind of like athletic, high athletic speed really kills everything on the draft last year. This year, it's more about big and fast. So Latham, the first thing that stood out to me when I watched this film was his quick feet and his handwork. He has what I like to call upper body violence, which is, just one of my favorite terms in football, and he has it perfectly. He rules people. Watch him in the Georgia game, man. He is just manhandling these big pro athletes, or what will be pro athletes one day, I'm sure. But my point is that it changed my view a little bit of him. And then, because I made the comment a couple weeks ago about Mike Munchak and how he changed my view on what you can really do with coaching and how far coaching can go. And I feel like Bill Callahan's one of those dudes. And like I said, he's done it twice before already. So we have the one example in the Browns where he took the right tackle, moved him to left tackle. He's been there, I think, 3 or 4 seasons now. I can't remember. But the better example is in Dallas, where he took a right tackle and moved him to left tackle, and he was a 7-year Pro Bowler, had a 12-year career by the name of Tyron Smith. I don't know if that rings any bells, but yeah, pretty darn good left tackle. And that was Bill Callahan, and he played right tackle in college, moved him to left tackle. So I have all the faith, man. If that guy with all that experience says that is his favorite lineman in the draft, then that's who we should pick. And that would be my answer to you, Link. If I was the GM, even so that might backfire on me in the end, I feel like you motivate your people by giving them what they want, especially in this kind of, what do you want to call honeymoon era of the Titans. Everybody's in the honeymoon phase right now. Oh, I love you too, to get through that process, I think you kind of give a little bit. And as the GM, I would probably say to the highly touted offensive coach, maybe one of the best coaches we have, other than his son, maybe. But who do you like? All right, let's go with that. But that's my take on that.
I agree. So if you're grading this one as a fan, where are you at on that? On the Latham pick? And I'll give mine. I mean, I think it's a solid. I don't know. I think time will tell. And I do think that sitting there at 7, like I said, you needed an offensive tackle. So for me, I mean, I'm giving it a B+. I think that could rise, as we go. I'm not at an A yet. I kind of want to see what he can do. I want to see what Callahan does with him. I do want to see him on the left side. The right tackle in college moving to the left, it doesn't scare me as much because of Callahan. So for me, it's probably about a B+. So just curious your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah. So ultimately, instant reaction, I had it as a C+. I've ultimately moved that to a B-. Okay. I think what was on the board, he was my prospect 12 on the big board at that point in time. So I did have quite a few ahead of him. And there was always the option Rand stated it. There was options on the table for a potential trade back. We don't know ultimately what those offers were. But if I'm looking at moving off from a high first to a middle first, I'm perfectly fine with that, picking up even a 4th rounder, 3rd rounder. The trade value charts, I don't really care about at that point in time. If you're getting a similar prospect, which I have very similarly at that point in time in the draft, I would have been over the moon with that. But I'm always team trade back. Ultimately, I think this is a grade, and if he comes out and shows out in training camp and gets into preseason, right, he's got all the tools. And ultimately, when I'm looking at it initially, I think he's a right tackle, and they immediately come out and squash that, said, hey, he's a left tackle. Mm-hmm. So I think that does raise his floor for me as well. But ultimately, I have it as a B- currently.
I mean, I'm always a little bit, I don't know if you want to call it jaded or just a homer, maybe. Just a slight bit, though. Not a lot. I'm realistic. I call myself a realistic fan, but I am still a fan. So I gave him like an A- after doing all the homework and stuff and looking at the the bare facts of things that I just explained to you guys. I said, you know what? I'm going to sit back and just, like we talked about pre-show, I'm going to trust that these guys that make a lot more money than me know what they're doing and just hope that they're right. And yeah, that's where I'm at with that one.
All right, fair enough. So round 2, this one was tough for me, and I'll let Max start it out. I'll just be honest straight ahead. I didn't like this pick. Did not like the second round pick at all.
So I hated the pick.
Okay.
Right? Like I absolutely hated the pick, dude. Like if you follow me on social media, everybody here knows that I said multiple times, I will be shocked if we go defensive player, any defensive player in the second round or the first round, either one. I thought first and second round were offense for sure, no doubt. And they rocked my world. Not only did they rock my world by taking a defensive player, but they took the one player that I didn't even put in my top 100 because I'm thinking like an old school Titans fan. And this is where I had to realize I have an open-minded wife because she's the one who actually brought it to my attention. She was like, dude, you're thinking like an old school Titans fan. You know, old school, yeah, Mike Vrabel, he wouldn't handle that stuff. He would not take a dude that just got hit with a DUI. But this is a different staff. And they have already signed a player or two that you said were kind of diva-ish. And if they're already bending to that, why would they not give it to this guy? So I was like, okay, I'll give you that. Then the very next day, which was this morning, I get up and I read on Twitter that he's working out with Adonai Mitchell and one other UT guy. I don't know.
Yeah, Jonathan
Texas
Brooks. They had 4 or 5 that were drafted. They were all working out is what it looked like.
My point is, and his statement was why he was working already so hard was that he wanted to prove everybody wrong, which to me is exactly the right attitude I want. And man, if he works out, if he is what they say he's going to be, him and Jeffrey Simmons are going to be how do you double team him and Jeffrey Simmons at the same time?
Yeah, I get that. I think for me, it was my concern is, and of course, I mean, there's stuff he has to work on the field, but obviously the off the field issues that was huge for a lot of teams. And I think what got me the most, he's working out with UT guys. He wants to prove people wrong. He wants to show that he's in this for the long run. But for me, it's like you said this before. You go into these meetings. Reports are you met with teams. You told them, yeah, I was a party guy. I like to party. I kind of do this stuff, but I'm turning over a new leaf. I'm ready to get on the field. I'm ready to make a difference. And then, what was it, a week before we start, you're hit with the DWI. So you've got to prove it to me. I think there is potential there. I think the ceiling's high. I think he has a lot of the metrics that you look for in a nose tackle. But for me, it almost seemed like this pick was, we need a nose tackle, we go get a nose tackle. I don't know. Yeah, he's got the physicality. I just feel like there were better picks sitting there at 38. And when you only have 2 picks in the top 100, you have to absolutely nail those picks. And I just feel like there may have been some better options, even guys he's working out with. I mean, Adonai Mitchell's still on the board at that point. I think if you get a guy like that, your wide receiver room becomes maybe the best in the AFC South. So for me, I think there were better options. But again, it's a prove it kind of thing for me. I hope he has success. I mean, as a Titans fan, I want to see him get on the field. I want to see him as a starting D tackle. And I think the potential's there. He's just got to work for it. He's got to prove it for me.
I don't know if you guys saw this comment, but this is hilarious.
Yeah, it was technically a DWI.
So what happened with that is he was out with a teammate over there at Texas, and they were driving home. I think it was the reported story, like 4 a.m, and his college teammate actually rear-ended him, which is the only reason the cops ended up coming out. But it's definitely under the influence.
Yeah.
So that doesn't change it for me. But it also doesn't drop it down my board for me. That's not an issue. We had Teron Davenport on the week before the draft, and this is a guy that he was very high on. And I think he had some rumors coming in from the team that this is the guy that they're very high on. But when you look at him over at Texas, you've heard all tic-tac. I love Tyler, but he was wrong in that, and I'll tell him that.
Yeah.
He said he's a two-down player. The man played 4 more snaps per game over Byron Murphy, who was drafted as the IDL 1 in the entire draft. So I think he can play all 3 downs. He can rush the passer. And ultimately, it might not end in sacks on the stat sheet for him, but he creates pressure. And that's going to allow people like sack merchants on the team, like Harold Landry, to keep those getting those up, and Arden Key. And it's going to make Jeffrey Simmons' job a lot easier as well. And then they also have a guy that was his teammate at Texas just 2 years ago, Keandre Coburn, who actually started over Sweat. Was a 6th-round draft pick last year by the Bills, I believe, came on late in the season. Played 4 or 5 games for us, and I liked what I saw. So I think this interior defensive line group is up there now with T'Vondre Sweat. Ultimately, I did have like 22 players higher rated than him on the board, but it makes sense. It fills the gap, and it makes everybody's life easier. This is going to make the linebackers' job, which might be the most glaring need on this team now, their life's that much easier because they're going to be able to they're going to be able to flow to the ball. They're going to be able to make tackles and not have to worry about getting in the trash. They're not going to have to worry about getting off blocks because they're going to have clear lanes because people have to account for Sweat and Simmons on the interior.
I'll say this. 2 things I want to say real quick. First of all, on the lighter side of things, if what you told me, I'm sure is accurate, then alcohol definitely probably wasn't related. And that actually makes me feel a lot better about it. Not that, he was doing that, but just the fact that he wasn't doing it with alcohol, because anybody who drinks and drives is an idiot. In my book, it just shows a level of intelligence that's a little low. Doing whatever he was doing and driving probably isn't smart either. I'm just saying, different conversation, different type of show. Anyway, my point is PFF, everybody knows how I feel about PFF, but he was the best graded defensive lineman by PFF. He had a 91.7 score. He's actually the best PFF grade we got in the entire draft. So talent-wise, the guy is way up here. Everybody's worried about his character, maybe a little bit about his weight issue or his playing weight. What is it going to be? As long as he shows up for camp in shape, ready to go with the right attitude, makes it all the way to the season without getting in trouble, I'm on board. But until then, I'm going to proceed with caution as far as it goes with Sweat. So I give that one like a C. I'm not really high on that one. I am not as bad as Tyler is. My God, he has been killing that kid online. And I get it, like he had same thoughts I did, just a little stronger, I guess. But my point is, it's not as bad as he's making it out to be, but it's not as good as some of the other people are making it out to be. I'm kind of in the middle as far as that goes.
Yeah, for me, I'd say look, here's how I feel about it. I think the initial grade, just because who was there, and again, it was a need on this team. For me, I think my initial reaction was probably like a C-. Now, that being said, just like you said, if he makes it to training camp, if he shows up in shape, if he gets on the field, I think that has a potential to jump to possibly a B+, if he can kind of match that ceiling and meet his potential, because I do think the metrics are there. So it has a possibility to jump for me, but right now I'm still kind of sitting at that C- range.
All right. Jake, you want to throw a letter out there, man?
So I gave this grade a C+. It's my lowest out of the draft, but it makes sense. It's an average pick for me. I can see the upside of it, and if we're looking at what this guy could be, I mean, he has the ceiling to be an Albert Hainsworth type of player for us.
Exactly.
But the floor might be pretty low as well. As far as the character, it's not a big concern for me. I from what I've heard from Texas coaches, Texas players, they all love him. He brings character to the locker room, and I think it's similar to like a Tajay Spears-esque kind of guy, where the players around him are going to love him, And from the outside looking in, some analysts or fans might see it as childish, but I don't see it that way. I think he's still becoming a young man, and ultimately I think he's going to mature around him. I don't think Big Jeff is going to allow him to be a cancer in this locker room, and I think it's going to keep him on track. So ultimately C+, and I really like the pick still. I mean, even being my lowest.
I love that quote, man. Big Jeff going to keep him. That is a great thought. My favorite pick of the draft, 4th round, Cedric Gray from North Carolina. I love this pick in the 4th round, man. Great value. Finally get to understand something. best coverage linebacker in the draft, probably. Next Gen Stats had him and Jeremiah Trotter had the same production grade. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they're rating as production, but hey, threw it out there. But yeah, no, I really like this kid. He is fast. He's always around the ball. He's a ball hawk, man. He's pretty much good at everything he does. He's a little thin, but super fast. Really like the pick. Cedric Gray. I give that pick personally an A, but y'all can go ahead.
Yeah, I don't hate the pick. I don't know if I'm that high. I'm curious to see how his game transitions to professional level. Again, like you said, speedy guy. He's a ball hawk. With the way that the linebacker situation looks right now on this team, I agree with Jake. I think it's probably one of, if not the most glaring issues on this team right now. He's got the potential to come into training camp and really make a splash, and I hope he's able to do that. But even if not, even if they go into free agency and they find something else, I think it's a good depth piece. I think he's got a lot of potential for the future. I'm excited to see him in the weight room and kind of maybe make a transition to get a little more physical. But yeah, I don't hate the pick. Being there at the 4th round, I think the value at that pick was pretty high. So for me, I'm around a B at that one. Don't hate it, but at the same time, I just want to see, like I said, how his game kind of transitions to professional in the NFL.
Yeah, I see it pretty similarly. I think it was a very good value pick for where he was on the board, and ultimately, I think this is their guy. They had him probably higher than most people had, and the media on their big board, just the way they're talking, and for them to come out after in the press conference, where it was like, "Hey, this is the green dog guy. He's a starter for us." Uber productive. We were talking production grades. Him and Jeremiah Trotter, the Cedric Gray. 3 past seasons, 100+ tackles over at North Carolina. So, I mean, he's always around the football, and that's what you're wanting. And I think as we see this Carthon era begin, we're seeing with the linebackers, it's not 1990s football anymore. They're not bringing in the 6'3", 250+ pound middle linebackers. They're going with the smaller guys that can drop into coverage, that can fly around, and we're talking about these big men up front, be able to fit into those gaps. Cedric Gray fits that mold. Otis Reese fits that mold. Kenneth Murray fits that mold. Jack Gibbons does not fit that mold, but that was a previous regime. So I think the talent, I see a high-quality backup in Cedric Gray that's going to be forced to play starting reps. So ultimately, a year from now, we might be revisiting this position, but I think it gives you a slightly below average player there that fits a huge need. And I think he does have some of those athletic traits and the leadership ability to call plays, but ultimately to have the team rally around him. I think we're looking at, and we've had it for the past handful of years, this running back by committee has been sweeping the league. I think we're looking at more of a linebacker by committee moving forward. Kenneth Murray, Cedric Gray out there, early downs. You bring in, we'll talk about him here later, James Williams, Otis Reese there on passing downs, guys that can drop into coverage and run with tight ends and running backs. I think you keep that rotation in there. Keeps guys fresh, but it also allows them to have the talent at least to defend the run as well. And when you have T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons out there on a third down and long or a third down and short even, they can still defend the run well by bringing in additional safeties and corners and secondary in general. So it allows them to be more versatile on defense. And I think that's ultimately what Denard Wilson wants his team to be. So I'm very happy with this pick. I gave it a B+. And I like I said, really like this pick.
Yeah, just super, super excited we got that guy, if I can be honest with you. That was one of the ones that I actually wanted before the draft, so I'm happy that they actually got one that I picked. But another, the next round, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. When they picked him, I was like, who? Because to be honest with you, that's a little deeper than I wanted to go in the draft. But man, what a physical cornerback. He plays really physical, plays way bigger than he actually is. I think he's like 5'11", 5'10", 194.
Yep. So
but he has 2,100 snaps in college. That is a lot of experience, and 5 interceptions. Not terrible 4.51 speed. So I don't know. I kind of like the pick. Again, depth piece. We're not talking starter, but decent depth piece.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's a position where you can't have enough guys. I think he could be a huge impact player, especially on special teams, starting out with the ability to kind of move into a quarterback position. So yeah, I mean, I don't hate the pick. The athleticism for me is a little bit lacking, but we're talking about later rounds. We're talking about guys who are really kind of just puzzle pieces that are going to have to kind of find their spot on this team, and he's going to have to earn his way up. But yeah, again, good value pick, and that's kind of seems like that's kind of the theme of this draft is, were there maybe better guys there at that time, yeah. But I think we're seeing the mold that this team is trying to move to on defense. I think that's huge. Even talking about Cedric Gray, the way that these players kind of fit into the scheme that I feel like the Titans are moving towards, they're on the right track. So for me, again, right now, starting out, I think you got a huge guy in special teams and a good depth player in a position where you can't have enough guys. As we've seen before, the cornerback position for the Titans has been a little bit lacking, and the more guys you have that you can put on that field, the better off you are.
No, definitely. I think we've gone from maybe one of the worst cornerback rooms in the entire NFL to top 5. We'll see by the end of the season, maybe number 1. You bring in L'Jarius Sneed to be that cover corner that can follow across the board. You got Roger McCreary, of course, already there. And then Chidobe Awuzie coming in as well. I think Brownlee Jr. fits in as CB4 immediately on this team over guys like Caleb Farley, Eric Garrer. There's these guys that you do not want touching the field. And Jarvis played a lot of snaps in college, played very well at the Senior Bowl as well. This is a guy that's going to get in your face at the line of scrimmage. And even with his small stature, I think he can play on the outside. And if there is ever an injury, I think he just fills in that gap wherever it is, if it's on the interior and slot or if it's on the outside. But with that, he's going to get your face. He's got that Dorito on his deltoid. He's got that chip on the shoulder. He's going to get up there and press you, and he's got that fuck you mentality. Mm-hmm. He wants to come after you. But with that, if the technique is not there, that's where those big plays occur as well. So he does have to clean up some of those things. But if you're learning from another corner that plays similarly, L'Jarius Sneed is that dude. So I think this is a guy in year 1, like you said, is going to play very well on special teams for you, but he's going to continue to grow. And I think he's the heir apparent in the secondary when either L'Jarius or Awuzie move on from their pass. I think he fits in next to him day 1 and is a starter for us. I really like what I saw there. This is ultimately, what did I give this one a grade? I think I gave it an A- if I remember correctly. Really happy with this pick. To get him in the 5th round is a value, is a very good value. 2nd highest grade that I have out of this draft class. We love Jarvis Brownlee.
Yeah, I never try to judge cornerbacks by their stature just because of Cortland Finnegan, dude. That guy changed my whole view on how tall you needed to be a cornerback. But I'm not trying to compare him yet. Like I said, we talked about this before show, but 3 years is what I like to do to grade a draft. So these are just gut reactions of what we think the players are going to fit like. 3 years down the road, we'll have a really good idea of what their actually value is. The next pick is my second favorite pick of the draft, Jaquan Jackson from Tulane. And I wouldn't have known about this guy except for the fact that apparently the love that I was giving Tajay Spears last year got a sports writer on Twitter for Tulane to start following me. I started following them, whatever. And I actually saw a couple tapes of Jaquan before this and thought it might be a decent guy to return. And that's mostly what I expect him to do, return duties. But I'm really excited about that. I think the guy's got a lot of play potential in between the, running around. And I'll leave it at that. I don't know. I don't really know that. It's pretty deep, man.
I'm going to be honest with you. This may be at the spot where he was drafted, and I might be insane for this. At the spot he was drafted, this may be my favorite pick throughout the whole draft for the Titans. Just because. So this guy, very highly recruited out of high school, doesn't necessarily live up to what people thought he was going to be coming out of high school, but this guy loves football. He loves being on the field. He's got the right attitude. And yeah, I think that the Titans fill a spot, not necessarily at receiver, but at that return position. I talked about this all last year going through. They really needed to go into this offseason and find a guy they can trust to start to get on special teams and start returning. Now we've seen maybe a few issues with hands. But I mean, you're looking at a team where you've got guys like Kyle Phillips. I mean, Nick Westbrook-Akine was out there trying to do. I mean, they just never had that solid guy that they could go to who could make a breakout special teams play. It just felt like they were always lacking in that department. We've seen this guy go 87 yards, 90 yards on these returns. His ability and his athleticism, especially at his side and the speed he has, he ran like a 4.42. It brings an element to this team that I feel like we haven't seen in a long time. And I think that he could be maybe one of the most explosive guys coming out of this draft, and I think he's really going to shock a lot of people. So I absolutely love this pick. This was probably at the position where he was drafted and the value they got for him. I gave this one an A. This was actually my highest rated draft pick in this draft.
And he came endorsed by Tajay Spears.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was there when he got drafted. This is Tajay Spears' roommate in college. So he's going to bring that energy. He's going to be there early in the building, working hard just like Tajay is. And he's going to get him that little fast track. But when I looked at Jaquan Jackson's tape, I saw a very big speedster. I think that's an element that the Titans have been missing for a very long time. This vertical threat that the Titans had this last couple of years has been Traylon Burks. And he runs a 4.55. This is not a fast vertical threat by any means. This is going to allow them to take off the top of the defense with that speed. I think underneath, he's still got to refine as a route runner. I didn't like a lot of what I saw and some inconsistencies more than anything. But like you guys talked about, as a returner, I will like to see him out there on punt returns from day one. So I think he's going to make this 53-man roster. As a kick returner, we'll see how that progresses. I might actually even prefer Kyle Phillips out there still. Don't just allow him to catch the ball and go. I think Kyle is more explosive in the open field and has the ability to find open space. So I do like Kyle Phillips there if he can stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. But if he doesn't stay healthy, no harm, no foul. We don't have any anticipation for that. But he does have to clear up the catches as far as Jackson goes. He did have 6 drops of punts in college. So it's something the Titans are very familiar with. So you do have to clear that up. He is very fast, though, and that's that one trait that he does have. He is smaller, so he's going to ultimately be in the slot. I think this could be that Khalif Raymond replacement that we haven't had since he left. So he's a smaller guy. He's going to be able to stretch the field. And Will Levis has that yeet cannon. He's going to throw it down there and just allow him to run underneath the ball. So ultimately, I didn't really like this pick. I thought it was a reach for where we did take him. And I think it may have been the biggest reach that I had actually on my draft board. I gave this a B-. So I think there was a lot better receivers on the board. But I do like the intangibles of this kid. He's got all the makeup and what we want in between the ears, and he loves football. And that's the biggest thing. But ultimately, I would have preferred probably 6 other receivers over him at the point in the draft where we did draft him.
Yeah, all right. First of all, I love the fact that you called it a yeet cannon. That is great. That's fantastic.
Chuck it and fuck it.
Yeah, man. And, just I have to say, Tajay Spears is probably my favorite new Titan as far as
100%
the
agree.
ones we got last year. He's great for media. He's just great for everything, man.
Watching him out there in that Miami game, he is that dude. And he is Will Levis's biggest fan. Mm-hmm. So he's going to have a big breakout this season. I guarantee that.
Yeah, and if Jackson comes with a little bit of the intensity that Spears brings to the table, I'm all for it, man. That's exactly what we need. All right, so after that, we get James Williams, who played mostly at safety, but they're talking about moving him to linebacker, which, I'm cool with, but he's 6'5" and 215, which is a big safety. I kind of like the idea of having a big safety, somebody who can just dump to go with Hooker. But, if they want to move into linebacker, that's their thing.
I think
from Miami,
that was his reported weight and size coming out.
Correct.
I think he actually weighed in at 6'3", around 230, if I remember correctly. So he's a little bit shorter, a little bit thicker.
Well, that makes a little bit of a difference then. It's all right, yeah. So he's more around the linebacker size. Completely shot holes in everything I was going to talk about. So cool. I get it. This is what I'm talking about, guys. This person is a 7th round draft pick, man. You know how many people you have to actually study to know a 7th round draft pick. That's what I'm saying. But my dude here knows about it. So I'm just going to say it was a decent pick for a 7th round draft pick.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you've got a guy who's versatile, who's played at some different positions. I don't, again, we're talking about the 7th round. I don't hate the pick. I think you still got value there. I see him as a guy who I still believe could possibly make the 53-man roster. Again, this is another guy that seems to just love football. From the reports I've seen and the way that people talk about him, he's a guy who's going to go out there and give 100%, no matter what position he's at, no matter where he's at on the field. So yeah, and guys like that are guys you want in the locker room. It seemed like when Vrabel was there and he started kind of losing the locker room and, there was talk about that. This is another guy who I think could bring energy and who I think is going to give 100%. And that's what you want to see for this team right now. So yeah, curious to see what he can do at training camp. He's definitely going to have to earn his stripes. He's going to have to earn his spot on this roster, but it seems to be pretty talented. Even given his physical attributes. So yeah, I'm curious to see where they line him up at, how they use him. A guy, he's one of the guys that I'm really going to be watching during preseason. He's going to be a good story. He's going to be a guy that's going to go out there and give his all. So definitely one of the numbers I'm going to be looking for come preseason time.
So I'll say this is my favorite pick of the entire draft.
Wow.
Where we drafted James Williams, 242? I had him at 114th on my big board.
Wow.
So 128 picks higher. So what James Williams brings to the table, former 5-star, going into Miami, played safeties. Obviously, we talked about the size and everything. He did play in the box quite a bit for them. And this is a walking highlight reel. You're looking for big hits. James Williams has them. And he's got those size to hop into the passing lanes. And we talked about it earlier. I think this is the guy that comes in on 3rd down in passing situations and can man up on a tight end, can hop into the slot and play that overhang for you. I think he does love football. So I actually had him rated higher than Cedric Gray as a linebacker coming out. And we didn't really get to watch James Williams as a linebacker, of course, until the Senior Bowl. And that's where he really hopped off the table for me. So I think the athleticism there, but he's got to grow. So coming in, he's not going to have all those, everything that you're looking for. He's still learning the position, but he is going to, like Hugo says in the chat, he's going to be a dog. He's going to be this dime backer for you from day one. He's making the roster, and he's going to be a special teams ace from day one. So ultimately, my favorite pick of the draft, I gave this a solid A, and I'm super excited to see what James Williams does for this team.
Well, right on, man. I'm glad that, again, I'm glad you do your homework because I'd never heard of him really before we drafted him. Not being mean to him, I'm just being real. But the next pick was another one that I was actually excited about because it felt like he was a great value at where we got him at. Jalen Harrell, I think that's how you say his name. I'm horrible with names, if y'all know that. 6'4", 242. But the encouraging thing about him is 10 sacks, 19 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. That's his career numbers. Now we go 6.5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. That's what he got in 2023. So most of this kid's production on his career numbers actually came in last season. So he came on hot at the end of last season. So I'm kind of excited about it. By the way, he is a very high motor guy. I talked about that with Chris Braswell, where I wanted him, but we didn't get him. But my point is that this guy is the high motor guy that I was talking about, just a lot later drafted.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Again, I think he's got a lot of athleticism. Another guy that I love watching these late round pick guys in the preseason, kind of like I talked about, because they're the prove it guys. He's a guy that's going to go out there. He's going to try to earn a spot on this roster. Do I see him making the 53-man roster this year? I don't know. I think he's still got a long way to go. I think he's got a lot to learn at the NFL level. Again, I don't know a ton about the guy, but yeah, I see potential there. And again, it's a 7th round pick. I feel like they still got value. I feel like for me, in this draft, I feel like you almost got more value with those later round picks than you did in the early rounds. So I don't hate it. Another guy I'm going to be watching in preseason, and we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, I see this as a depth piece more than anything. This is a guy that's going to be competing on the roster with a Rashad Weaver, a Caleb Murphy, etc. I do think he does make the 53. And I think he is that rotational behind probably Weaver, who's probably on his last chance to actually prove himself with Arden Key.
Do something.
Jalen Harrell, he has very fast hands, and he's a hands fighter that wins with speed. He doesn't have that power aspect to his game, but he does have good length for the position. And ultimately, he was very productive, like you said, at Michigan. But does that come down to him being a product of everybody that was around him on the best defense in the entire nation, or was it actually him? So I do see this as a value pick and where they got him. I think I had like a late 6th round grade. They got him in the 7th, etc. So I do like where they did get him. I'm glad that they did bring him in, and edge is a huge need on this team as well. So if that's somebody that they can bring in and bring up and teach him to be a pro, I think he does have some things that you would like there as a rotational pass rusher. But ultimately, we're talking about a 7th round pick here. So he's ultimately going to be a depth piece. Can you contribute on special teams? Because that's going to help you keep that spot on the roster. Would I be surprised if they go over him with like a Caleb Murphy? No, I wouldn't be surprised. But ultimately, I do have a B grade on this, and I do think he does make the 53-man roster as the 4th edge on this team.
Cool. So here's a really good question posed by James Sally. How many starters are going to be rookies this year? Personally,
I think it's 3.
Really?
Yeah, so I think it's 3. I think it's Cedric Gray, Javondre Sweat, J.C. Latham. Pretty straightforward. If Jaquan Jackson or Jarvis Brownlee or James Williams, Jalen Harrell are starters for us, injuries occurred, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you consider nickel a starting position? Or?
I do, but I think it's Roger McCreary.
You're dead on right about that. It is Roger McCreary. Sorry, got a little caught up.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I'd say 3, maybe 4. The one that I could throw in there would be a Jaquan Jackson. Putting him in a slot position, and I'm not saying he's going to start every game, but I do feel like he might towards the end of the season if he shows that he can be explosive, if he can show that, especially on special teams, if he can show the feet, if he can figure out the hand situation, if he can fix some of that, get a little better route running under him, I feel like he could be that 4th starter. But other than that, I would agree. I would say 3 to 4.
I think Jackson could be a starter by the end of the season because Traylon Burks and Kyle Phillips will be in wheelchairs.
That's very true. Absolutely. That's very
true. I think Jackson could be the starter as far as a punt returner goes. We were talking about that earlier, by the way. I really wanted to say I think Chestnut's going to be our kick returner this year. I think or at least he's got my eye to be kick returner. I don't know.
Chestnut's an interesting player to bring up just because of these undrafted free agents that they've bringing in. And obviously Chestnut was a undrafted free agent in his own right. But guys like Dylan Johnson, Jabari Small out of Tennessee, which I'm sure Volunteer fans will love out of Tennessee.
Hey, we finally got some balls on the Titans.
We're not spitting in their face any longer. We got Jabari Small, guys.
I love it.
So right. I think these are 2 players that could push Chestnut maybe potentially out of a job at RB3. Mm-hmm. Personally, I think Dylan Johnson will be the RB3 out of Washington. I really like what I see on tape, and he is that hammer. Very similar prospect to Chestnut, but less wear and tear, and I think he's got a little bit more burst to his game. I think that's going to really play out in the preseason. Who's going to get these snaps, and ultimately, can you pass protect? That's a big question to me, and I think Jabari Small might be the better pass protector out of these 3. So it could play out a lot of different ways, but I think the preseason is what's going to ultimately decide that for RB3 behind Pollard and Spears.
Yeah, call me a VFL. I'm all in on Jabari Small. Absolutely love it. Love the pickup. Love to see him in a Titans uniform. And that's exactly what I was going to say. The pass protection is going to be huge for me. And I feel like coming out of college, he's shown that he can do that. And this is a guy that I expect to be super explosive in the run game and in the pass protection during the preseason. I would not be surprised by day 1 of the regular season if we don't see Jabari Small in that 3rd running back position. Wouldn't shock me at all. Just, of course I'm a Vols fan. Probably going to get some hate for that, but absolutely. Even other than that, I think he's got the metrics. I think he's got the talent, and I think he's got the drive to earn that 3rd running back position.
I hate the Volunteers, and I agree with Link.
I love it.
I'm a Georgia fan, but yeah, no, I also have to agree. Jabari Small. They also got Gabe Judy, but Jabari Small is by far a better pickup as far as I'm concerned. But I love Michael Newsom here. He's giving us a good question, and it's hilarious at the same time. Who has more yards? Nick Westbrook-Akine, or who has more touchdowns? Nick Westbrook-Akine or Burks and Phillips combined?
No.
I'm going to say NWI.
I think ultimately what you're looking at, maybe an over-under of 3.5 between all of them. I would ultimately take the field in Burks and Phillips just because I think they're going to fall into the end zone, and Burks might be picking them up off fumbles like he's done in the past.
Yeah.
But if they can stay healthy, which indeed NWI ended the season on IR. So this isn't a guy that's super healthy either at this point in time. But if you're relying on any of these 3 to be a huge production in the receiving game, team's probably in trouble to begin with. But maybe Burks will have that 3rd-year breakout. Maybe Kyle Phillips will have that 3rd-year breakout. And maybe NWI will be roster pirating yet again and make this roster as the wide receiver 6.
So you can clip it, and I'm probably going to hate myself for it, and I feel like I say the same thing year after year with this guy. But this is if there was ever a prove-it year for Burks, this is it. And I feel like if if maybe they try him out in the slot and if he can stay healthy, I feel like the ceiling might still be there. Do I see him as a number one on this team? Probably never. Absolutely not. But I still feel like if he can be healthy, if he has a good offseason, if he can get his conditioning, if he can stay on the field, I feel like he can be a productive player on this team. Do I see him catching 10 touchdowns? Absolutely not. Do I see him as a 1,000-yard receiver? Absolutely not. But I feel like he can come in and produce for this team if he can stay on the field, because that's been the biggest. We've seen flashes, but you've seen flashes with a lot of players. So if he can stay on the field, if he can stay healthy, if he can figure out some of his issues, if he can get his conditioning right, because I feel like that's what's held him back more than anything, because it's hard to be football ready if you're not playing football. And that's just been an absolute detriment to his career. So I'm not completely out on the guy yet, but like I said, if there's ever been a prove it year, if I've ever wanted to see a guy succeed more, it's this year for Traylon Burks. And he's a guy that I'm watching. And hey, get your snaps in preseason. I mean, I feel like this is going to be, I feel like it's going to be a big preseason for him, because you're going to have 3 games where the coaching staff wants to see you prove it to earn your spot on the field in the regular season.
Look, I will say this on camera so that everybody can hear me clearly. I'm over Burks. I'm done. I'm absolutely done. I got burned earlier in the offseason for saying that he looked like he showed up to camp a little overweight, which he did. Mm-hmm. And people are like killing me, and I'm like, bro, he's got like 3-4 touchdowns. It's terrible, man. I'm tired of saying that, oh, this is his season. This is it. He's stayed in Nashville and acclimated to the weather, and his asthma's better. And I'm done, dude. I'm done. I'm done relying on him, and I'm done relying on Phillips. I don't want to rely on either one of those for anything. If they produce, great. If they turn into awesome wide receivers, man, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm eating crow at the end of the season talking about how Burks had 1,000, 1,200 yards. But I just don't see it. And that's my take on that. I'm done with Burks and Phillips.
To be the devil's advocate, if I'm trying to look at a way for Burks to be productive with this team, with the new regime, if I'm looking at Brian Callahan coming in, and he was successful with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins accordingly. So T. Higgins, we're looking at the most similar in size and athleticism and everything. Traylon Burks might fit that mold as the most natural to fit into that role. So I think he could fit that wide receiver 3. And they talked about him not playing in the slot. Maybe it's just been a Freudian slip where he didn't bring him up in that discussion. But I think he's going to get snaps out there. And he has this ability to build this rapport with Will Levis this offseason. So he could come in, and I think he could surprise a lot of people in this vertical passing game with Callahan and Will Levis. But ultimately, the biggest decision with all of these guys is, can you stay healthy? Can you be on the field? Can you learn the playbook? Which I think may have been Traylon Burks' biggest hindrance there early in his career with, of course, the asthma, but learning the playbook. There was lots of mental lapses. So can he come in and learn this new regime's playbook is another big question. But I think the traits are there. It's just putting it together. So we'll see. We'll see how all this plays out. I could see the path of him being, and you said 1,000, 1,200 yard receiver. I think ultimately what you're looking at is a guy to come in and be Chris Moore for you. Absolutely. 600 to 800 yards, 4 to 6 touchdowns, and be a wide receiver 3 behind Nuke and Calvin Ridley.
Yep. But see, that's my argument right there, man. We're talking about a first-round draft pick, wide receiver, and we're going to be happy with 400 to 600 yards of production from that first-round draft pick. And we would be happy for that, because that's what we're going to get. Maybe. We might not even get that. I don't know. I'm sorry. It's a sore subject with me, if you can't tell.
It's all relative when thinking about where people were drafted. Yep. And like Caleb Farley, I mean, obviously first round draft pick as well. If he comes out and plays 100 snaps for the defense, it doesn't even have to be good. He plays 100 snaps. I'm going to be ecstatic for that young man just because of everything he's gone through. So it's all just perspective. people are labeled as first-round talents all the time, and they don't pan out as these superstars. But can they be decent pros? Can they be average? That's all you're really looking for. When you look at these teams that are built out the 2nd through 7th round, it's going to be littered with people that you've never heard of before in the league just because they're depth pieces. Doesn't mean they're terrible players, but you got to fill out that back end of the roster. So I think it could be we take that tag of first round off of him. I think you can be very happy with what we're going to get out of him.
So all that being said, just to kind of close out the draft talk here, we've talked about, and I think Maximus said earlier, it's hard to really grade a draft class until about 3 years down the road to kind of see where everybody falls, see who ended up being depth pieces, see who those late round picks were that kind of proved themselves and worked their way up. And, I love looking at redrafts and going back because, stuff gets crazy. So right now, as of this year, just grading it how you would now, overall grade for this year's draft class. What are you guys thinking?
I have it as a B, and I think you put it very well. It holds as much stock as the 1,000 of mock drafts I did this past season. It means absolutely fucking nothing.
Yep.
And we won't know way well down the line, and it still probably won't mean anything. But
Yep.
I ultimately gave it a B in totality. Good, not great.
Yep.
That is literally, I was thinking the same thing before Jake said it. But yeah, B. Maybe a B minus just because I don't quite agree with some of the picks, but I'm just trusting. But yeah, I don't know, B minus, somewhere around in there.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I'd say about a C plus. I feel like this draft was we had a need, we filled a need. But even saying that, looking back at last year's draft class, I probably would have gave that a C minus at the time. I wasn't sold on guys like Will Levis. I had questions about Tajay Spears, and looking back now, these are centerpieces of the offense. So for me, I'm right there. I'm probably, I'm C minus. But yeah, I feel like my initial reaction is worse than my reaction is now. I do think Carthon has a good knack for picking guys out. I feel like Callahan got a lot of the guys that he wanted. Was there better picks at some positions? Yes, but did you get value at other positions and other picks? Absolutely. So yeah, for me, it was solid, not great. I've seen everything from B pluses and A's to D minuses. So again, it's so hard to tell right now, but really curious to see some of these guys get on the field, see what they've got, and see who really wants to earn their roster spot. That's going to be the biggest thing for me is, are you going to show up early? Are you going to stay late? Are you going to come out in preseason and treat it like you're trying to earn a spot on this team? Because let's face it, there's a lot of veterans on this team. I don't feel like everybody's job is safe at this point. I think a lot of these guys in this draft class were brought in, if nothing else, than to push the guys that are already in those positions. So we'll see how it pans out. But I think we got guys. The biggest thing is right now, I think we got guys with drive, and that's what you want to see on a football team.
Yeah, man, I agree. I think we're headed in the right direction. Like I said, I don't agree with all these picks, but I didn't agree with them last year, like Link said.
Exactly.
I was really torn by the Tajay Spears. I didn't even know who Tajay Spears was until we drafted him. Then I went and watched some tape, just like I did on Sweat and Latham. I knew who they were, but I didn't really pay that much attention to them because I wasn't expecting us to draft them. But once we did, I went and started studying a lot on the player, and I'm happy with what I'm seeing. I'm understanding why they made the pick. So now I'm just trying to trust that they'll do the same thing they did last year and produce. If we get the first 3 players out of this team as starters, or the draft as starters, then I think we have succeeded. That to me is an amazing, successful draft. Usually it's the first 2. You might get 1 depth piece out of your lower picks. And that's just how it shakes down. 2 or 3 years down the road, a lot of these guys aren't even playing in the league anymore. So I feel like 3 starters from a draft class is pretty darn good. Yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on it. Any final thoughts between you two guys before we wrap this thing up?
I think ultimately you weren't going to fix this team in an offseason. There was far too many holes. So I think what Rand Carthon has done is address needs with talented players, which is good process in general. But I think this team has also got much younger especially on the defense. I think the oldest player on this team now on the defensive side of the ball is Sebastian Joseph Day, and I think he's 29. We look at last season, we had Danico Autry's corpse out there at 34 years old. So I think this team is getting younger, and I think this team is going to grow together and is already going to be a good defense, but I think it can be one of the greats. And then you have Will Levis. Ultimately, this team lives or dies by what Will Levis does on the football field. And Rand has done a great job of building around him. He's got his blind side. He's bringing in weapons. He's got guys like Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, Nuke out there. The tight end group is still up and coming, but I see what they're looking to do with that. Offensive line, you didn't fix it, but you got a lot better. So I'm very excited to see what this season unfolds. Ultimately, we're probably a year or two away still, but the building blocks, the foundation is there now. We're not putting the roof on top of the house before we build up the walls. So I think the process is correct. And this is more of meat and potatoes-esque draft. It's not sexy by any means, but I think it's what the Titans need. Super happy.
Absolutely. Yep. I would agree with all those points. And for me, kind of like you said, and just to build on that, I feel like you're starting to see the mold of what this team wants to be. And I think for the first time in a long time, we're going to see something different. We're not going to see Derrick Henry in 3 steps in a cloud of dust. It's not going to be that anymore. We're going to see the offense run through Will Levis. We're going to see more explosive guys like Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard. We're going to see a defense who actually has a secondary, in my opinion. This team is becoming more of the new age football that I feel like a lot of Titans fans have wanted to see for a long time. And hats off, still love Derrick Henry. I wish him all the success in the world. But I think here in Tennessee and here in Nashville, you're going to see something that's going to be a different product, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And I would agree that you're probably 2 or 3 years down the road, but you're getting the right pieces in place, and you're getting guys that I feel like are going to mesh well together, and that's what ultimately makes a championship team. That's what gets teams like Kansas City, like we've seen in Philly with the success they've had. That's what gets them there. They grow together, they work together, they show up together, and they fight for each other. And I feel like that's what this team's moving toward. So I want to see a great locker room. I want to see these guys have success, and I want to see the Titans be great. And I feel like that's what we're working on.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm awfully excited this offseason. I am very excited with the moves we've made. I did not expect a lot of the moves that we've already made, especially in free agency. That blew my mind that we got Calvin Ridley, Awuzie, and Snead all in the same offseason. That doesn't seem like that was real, but real fast turnaround. Went from a rebuild to a remodel real fast. So I love that. If you're watching us for the first time, check us out, man. Titans Global Podcast. Our special guest tonight was Jake Robertson, Glory Day Sports, man. Thank you again for coming on and hanging out with us. We always love to have you, man.
Hey, happy to be here. It's always a blast. Happy to hop on anytime.
Absolutely, man. Link, any final thoughts or anything?
Nope. Good to see you guys again. We're still here for it, and we'll talk to y'all next time. Excited to see where this draft class goes, and excited to see what's next.
All right. Well, until next time, tighten up.
Tighten up.
Peace out.